Chapter 6.2 Ice Field of Wanli. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. As when Renha thought about how his subordinates' loyalty to him stemmed from his powerful cultivation, and that they were doing all they could, never thinking of pulling him down from his position, he felt Xu Yanyan was such an ambitious woman. She leaned towards Wen Renha and whispered in a soft voice, similar to the temptation from the abyss, "Lord, you have gained strength and power, don't you think about other matters? That Bailey Qingmiao is really a pure girl, do you want this subordinate to help you coax her?" Xu Yanyan didn't notice that as soon as she finished speaking, Yin Hanjiang's face paled. He stood stiffly by the wall like a puppet without any emotion. Xu Yanyan knew that she did not have the charm that could seduce her lord, but that didn't matter. As long as she saw that when Renha's heart was willing to be moved in his defense weekend, how could she not take advantage of it? Xu Yanyan, when Renha's palm pressed on her head, not at all gentle, as if he was planning to crush Xu Yanyan's skull. "I have always appreciated your ambition and have allowed you to develop. I also don't mind the fact that you try to put your evil ideas in my head. Lord is magnanimous." Xu Yanyan was too scared to even breathe. When Renha then added with anger evident on his face, "However, don't do things that are beyond your capability. Use your ambition in the right manner. I am still waiting for the war between the righteous path and the demon path to improve my strength." Every time there was a massacre, when Renha's cultivation improved. Whenever his cultivation progressed, it was always in a battle. In his present state, a battle between mortals was of no importance, but a war that affected the whole cultivation world was significant. The time now was just right for a battle, and when Renha was simply taking advantage of this to have a breakthrough in his realm. Yes. Xu Yanyan felt a sharp pain on her head. Several droplets of warm blood trickled down her forehead. Her newly devised scheme completely dissipated from her mind. When Renha thought that the lesson was enough, he let go of her head. Yin Hanjiang handed over a handkerchief to him. He wiped the blood from his fingertips and casually threw the handkerchief on the ground. Xu Yanyan did not dare to wipe herself, and with a blood-covered face she said to Wen Renha, "This subordinate will do her best to investigate. The day when the Lord returns from the ice field of Wanli will be the time when the battle will begin. One more thing, let that He Wenchao fall for you as much as possible." "I want Bailey Qingmiao to give up on this man," Wen Renha said. "Yes." Xu Yanyan's hair was loose and she looked like a ghost when she bowed her head. After waiting for a while she did not hear any sound in front of her, so she looked up and found that the two men had already left. Then for a while she sat there clasping her scared heart. After treating her wound, from upstairs she saw He Wenchao going towards her house. Xu Yanyan sneered secretly, "Ah, men, so impatient." He came running as soon as his junior martial sister left. He couldn't even bear it for a few days. However, such a man still gave her a sense of achievement. The Lord and the left protector. Xu Yanyan shook her head, forcing herself to forget the painful experience and concentrated on dealing with He Wenchao. When Renha took Yin Hanjiang to the entrance of the ice field of Wanli. Seeing that Yin Hanjiang's face was very pale, he took the initiative to hold his hand. It was really just as cold as an ice corpse. He then said, "Since you can't stand the cold and considering the fact that your body is already this cold, it would be better that I enter alone." Looking at the endless ice field, Yin Hanjiang shook his head and said, "It's said that there are real immortals living in seclusion scattered here and there in this ice field, and that they are extremely dangerous. This subordinate must follow the Lord. I order you to wait here," Wen Renha commanded. "This subordinate will not try deceiving the Lord. When the Lord enters, this subordinate will follow. Stubborn like a sword that does not know how to bend and honest enough to move people's minds." After hearing that, Wen Renha stretched out his finger, cut his wrist, and held it in front of Yin Hanjiang, saying, "Although the path of slaughter is despised by the righteous path, it is also the way to the yang. The bloodshed and the solemnity of war and the killing qi that even the fierce ghosts do not dare to approach bursts out when tens of millions of men are fighting, which fills the blood with yang qi. If you take some of my warm blood, my cultivation will protect you all the way in the thousands of miles of ice. Lord, you are hurt. How can you hurt yourself for your subordinate? Yan Hanjiang's ruthless eyes showed a trace of pain. The qi of the sword is cold and bleak, you will not be able to exert the full strength of the unity of the sword in the ice field of Wanli. Do you want this lord to save you? What right do you have to say that you are immoral and incompetent? When Renha continued, if you refuse, this lord will seal your qi and leave you at the entrance of the ice field of Wanli. The blood slowly flowed out from his wrist. Yin Hanjiang closed his eyes in agony but immediately opened them again, clenched his teeth and leaned towards Wen Renha's wrist to drink his warm blood. A stream of warmth surged into his dantian. Wen Renha used his qi to stop the bleeding and squeezed Yin Hanjiang's fingers. Feeling that they were finally warm, he nodded his head in satisfaction. Yin Hanjiang's expression was somewhat unnatural as he touched his warm chest, sensing a strange feeling in his heart. It was not right, as the Lord's sword, he shouldn't have a mind of his own. He suppressed the feeling of confusion and became silent in front of Wen Renha. They had been waiting for 10 days, but Bailey Qingmiao was late. It was not surprising to Wen Renha that the female lead would be late when she was gaining experience alone. It was normal for her to encounter some serious accidents on the way that delayed her trip. Bailey Qingmiao was quite embarrassed to inform them, I'm sorry, senior, I came across a village cursed by ghosts on my way. I was delayed for a few days to help them ward off the evil spirits. A village cursed by ghosts. When Renha's heart sank, thinking that male lead number 5, Bailey Qingmiao's young apprentice was going to make an appearance. This little disciple was born as a stillborn child at the time Bailey Qingmiao got rid of the evil spirits. In fact, an evil spirit that had got injured did not disappear, but hid inside the stillborn child, his heart full of hatred toward Bailey Qingmiao. 18 years later, he met Bailey Qingmiao, who was already at nascent soul stage. He bowed down to Bailey Qingmiao, accepting her as his master and waiting for an opportunity to swallow her soul. Later, Bailey Qingmiao's kindness, innocence, beauty, gentleness and other virtues moved the ghost cultivator. Afterward he was willing to be her apprentice and hated He Wenchao for making his master cry. He secretly tried to assassinate He Wenchao, but got his identity as ghost cultivator exposed. A vicious girl took advantage of the situation to make it look like Bailey Qingmiao colluded with evil spirits. The purpose of his appearance was presumably to give He Wenchao a better reason to abuse the female lead. Wen Renha didn't care about this little detail. Anyway, after all, with his intervention Bailey Qingmiao wouldn't like the male lead, so it didn't matter. The three of them entered the ice field of Wanli. In order to make it easier for Bailey Qingmiao to find the snow flame, Wen Renha gave her a tracking spell and ordered Bailey Qingmiao to wander around the endless ice field. He and Yin Hanjiang watched her from a distance. Bailey Qingmiao's cultivation was still weak. Even with the protection of the flaming feather cloak, she was still purple from cold as she walked through the snow and ice. On the other hand, Yin Hanjiang, who was at the spirit combination stage, drank Wen Renha's blood, and Wen Renha still gave him qi from time to time. His face was ruddy in the past few days, and his body temperature improved a lot, which was in a big contrast with Bailey Qingmiao. Yin Hanjiang observed Bailey Qingmiao's movements and held back several times when he wanted to ask something. After following this routine for 5 months, Bailey Qingmiao relied on the danger of the ice fields to cultivate her realm to the upper layers of Qi Foundation and was close to breaking through to the Golden Core stage by cultivating her mind, but she had not seen any trace of the snow flame yet. Even when Renha didn't expect them to spend such a long time in the ice field of Wanli. He was puzzled. It shouldn't be like this, the snow flame was the destiny of the heroine Bailey Qingmiao. How can it not be found? As he recalled the plot, he found that the current timeline was consistent with the timeline in the book. He Wenchao, who had been drained by Xu Yanyan, was accompanied by Bailey Qingmiao, who found him and went to search for the medicine with him. In the book, Bailey Qingmiao didn't have the protection of the flaming feather cloak, so after 3 days in the ice field of Wanli her limbs froze. She used all her qi to protect He Wenchao. She climbed on the ice with him on her back. When she was about to die, there was a flash of fire before her eyes. She grabbed the flame with all her strength and shed tears. Must she be on the verge of death to see the snow flame? Wen Renhe wondered. The Devil Venerable was a man of action. He summoned with his mind the flaming cloak on Bailey Qingmiao's body in his hand, and the woman who was only at Qi Foundation stage froze and shivered in cold. Seeing the Devil Venerable do so, Yin Hanjiang opened his mouth again. When Renhe noticed his expression and asked, "What did you want to ask all this time? I command you to speak." With Wen Renhe's order, it was easier for Yin Hanjiang to open his mouth and ask, "Lord, don't you like this Miss Bailey? Then why? If you have good feelings for her, why would you let Bailey Qingmiao freeze to death? Who told you that I had feelings for her?" Wen Renhe felt this matter was very important. He couldn't let Yin Hanjiang misunderstand him like it happened in the book. He reached out his hand and pointed at his forehead saying, "This Lord is pushed by the opportunity of heaven. I have been graced with enlightenment by her in her past life. In this life, I have to repay her, that's why I helped her out." "This subordinate understands," Yin Hanjiang replied and then pointed at Bailey Qingmiao for some reason. "But Miss Bailey is dying now." "It doesn't matter," answered Wen Renhe. "There are so many cultivation methods in this world. If you are dead, it is still possible to become a ghost cultivator. Who stipulates that you have to practice the righteous path?" Yin Hanjiang was silent for a while and then nodded his head. What his lord said always made sense. Edited by Ninja Proofreader. Talia. Chapter 7.1. Battle of the Scattered Immortals. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Bailey Qingmiao's character was connected to her previous life's identity. No one in her previous life dared to lie in front of her, and her devastating strength made her unbothered if others told the truth or lied. Regardless, she never wanted to hear a word, so as a result, in this life she had little ability to detect lies. She never considered that the sudden appearance of an elder might harm her. The elder's cultivation was so profound that it was easy to kill a junior like her, so what was the point of setting her up? When the fire feather cloak disappeared, Bailey Qingmiao didn't think much of it. She thought that the reason why it disappeared was because the cold of the ice field of Wanli was too heavy and the spirit left by the fire feather cloak got exhausted and disappeared, or that she met a powerful monster in the ice field that took it away from her. She used her cultivation to warm herself and walked through the endless white landscape. Where should she look for the snow flame? Bailey Qingmiao didn't have the slightest idea. All she knew was that the elder had asked her to go according to her own will and said she would find it one day. The ice field of Wanli was covered with snow all year round. The sky was dark in the daytime and at night the snow reflected the light in the sky. It was hard to distinguish between day and night. Bailey Qingmiao did not know how long she walked. She cried many times on the way, but she never gave up, not even once. Shangqing sect taught their disciples to keep their promises. Bailey Qingmiao had made a promise to that elder, and she would never betray her promise. Without the flaming cloak, Bailey Qingmiao soon fell in a pile of snow, and the sky was fluttering with heavy snow. She then slowly stretched out her frozen fingers to catch the snowflakes. Located in the south of the Yangtze River, Shangqing sect was the most spiritual place in Zheozhou, with the 4 seasons being like spring and with very little snow. Bailey Qingmiao, who was just 16-year-old, believed that the snow that fell on the ground turned immediately into mud, so she had never seen snowflakes. Bailey Qingmiao pouted, somewhat angry, as she sat on the stone steps of the sect in a daze. Elder martial brother He Wenchao was on duty that day. Seeing his junior martial sister sitting in the snow with her knees folded, and her goose-yellow dress already stained with mud, he asked, "Bailey Qingmiao, why are you sitting here?" "Looking at the snow," said Bailey Qingmiao unhappily. Such beautiful snow will soon melt. I'm unhappy to be unable to watch the snow fall. He Wenchao smiled and stopped in his tracks, then said to his junior martial brothers and sisters who followed the patrol behind him, "How is your cold ice cultivation going? You might as well practice while it's snowing today." After that, he took a dozen disciples to perform the cold ice cultivation at the same time. The area around Shangqing sect was enveloped in cold air, the snowflakes no longer melted, but fell one by one on Bailey Qingmiao. "Happy birthday, junior martial sister." He Wenchao wished Bailey Qingmiao with a warm smile. Bailey Qingmiao heard the sound of snow falling and the uncontrollable loudness of her own heartbeat, and only then did she know that she had fallen for her elder martial brother. The snow of the ice field of Wanli would not melt even without cold ice cultivation. It fell and buried Bailey Qingmiao in the snow. The bright yellow dress could no longer be seen. Bailey Qingmiao closed her eyes in the snow, tears frozen on her face, as she whispered, "Elder martial brother, woo woo woo." A voice sounded in her ears, "What an infatuated girl. Thinking about your lover." The voice was extremely cold, like the sound of snow falling from a distance. It sounded like a woman's. Bailey Qingmiao's face was frozen, as she opened her mouth and said quietly, "Elder martial brother." She gradually fell unconscious. At that moment, a ray of light fell on her. A warm temperature enveloped Bailey Qingmiao and the snow flame rose from the ground. Bailey Qingmiao opened her eyes and saw a cluster of flames appear in the palm of her hand. Her limbs and bones warmed up, but the snow around her didn't melt because of this fire. The snow flame. O.org. It turned out that this magical flame was really buried in the snow and could only be discovered when her whole body was completely buried in snow. Bailey Qingmiao's aura was restored and she crawled out of the snow with that cluster of flames in her palm. She then saw the snow condense into a woman clad in white. She had white hair and eyebrows, with skin as white as snow. Her face and eyes were also white without black pupils. Rather than a person, it was an ice sculpture made of wind and snow. Transparent fingers brushed over Bailey Qingmiao's cheek and the voice said again, "Sweet child, take the snow flame and go see your lover. But promise me that if someday your lover betrays you and you become disheartened, you will come back to accompany me." "Dream on," a voice sounded, and the snow flame in Bailey Qingmiao's palm moved to that person's hand. Devil Venerable Also collected the snow flame and felt relieved. It turned out that only when Bailey Qingmiao was buried in the snow and reflected on her deep love for He Wenchao would the snow flame appear, her body growing as cold as ice and the heart warmer than the sun. Only this kind of warmth could attract the snow flame in the ice field of Wanli. But what was this woman doing here? She didn't appear in the original plot. When the white woman saw Wen Renhe and Yin Hanjiang show up, one of her arms suddenly broke and fell, turning into flying snow, rotating and gathering together, turning into a whirlwind that drove straight to Yin Hanjiang's heart. It was hard to keep up with the speed of the whirlwind. Wen Renhe waved his sleeve to stop it when Yin Hanjiang was swept in the storm. The clad in black Yin Hanjiang flew into the sky. The snowflakes turned into countless ice knives, leaving bloody marks on his face. "Elder!" Bailey Qingmiao screamed in surprise and asked the white woman, "This elder, both of them are my companions. I took the snow flame for them, do not rob them of it." When Yin Hanjiang was attacked, Wen Renhe did not move, the only one who panicked was Bailey Qingmiao. Yin Hanjiang's long sword was sheathed and fused with his entire being, and in an instant, his body scattered and transformed into countless blood rays. If one looked closely, the blood rays were actually countless blood-red swords, and under each sword edge the snow and wind barrier would open a gap. Under the blood rays, the storm that was formed with the help of the ice field of Wanli was split by the swords. After breaking through the snow, the countless blood swords turned around and gathered beside Wen Renhe, slowly turning into Yin Hanjiang, who was wearing a fire feather cloak. Bailey Qingmiao was dumbfounded when she saw the fire feather cloak on Yin Hanjiang's body. The white woman patted her head and pointed at Yin Hanjiang. "Are you stupid? These two are so powerful. Did they really need you to come to the ice field of Wanli? They clearly know what I like and used your life to lure me out. Do you really think they care about your life and death? No. Elder, you misunderstood. Bailey Qingmiao believed that both sides were good people, but just had a misunderstanding, so she spread her arms to shield Yin Hanjiang and Wen Renhe, not letting the white woman hurt them. It was probably the first time the white woman saw such a silly girl, and with a wave of her snowy sleeve, she threw Bailey Qingmiao aside as she exclaimed angrily, "Get lost." Bailey Qingmiao was thrown into an ice wall and became a mural in the ice, still maintaining a protective pose with her arms outstretched and her face full of concern. When Renhe carefully observed Bailey Qingmiao's expression and posture, and finally resolved a doubt in his heart. There were many descriptions in the book of Bailey Qingmiao spreading her arms to stop an attack for He Wenchao, Wen Renhe, Zhong Liqian, and others, when the Devil Venerable read the novel. He didn't understand the brain circuit of the female lead, and felt that this part of the description was completely unreasonable. Every time Bailey Qingmiao wanted to protect someone, the cultivation of the protected person had to be higher and stronger than hers. No normal person would use a body at Qi Foundation stage to protect a Mahayana stage expert. It wasn't until Bailey Qingmiao made such a move in front of him that he was convinced that the female lead was really capable of such a thing. But he still couldn't understand the logic behind that action. His black robe fluttered in the wind, and the Devil Venerable instantly appeared in front of Bailey Qingmiao. He extended his finger, making the ice wall shatter. Bailey Qingmiao fell on the snow. She covered her heart with her hand in fear and said to Wen Renhe, "Thank you very much, Elder." Wen Renhe didn't need her thanks, but looked down at her and asked, "Do you know how strong I am?" Bailey Qingmiao don't know. Maybe Elder is at nascent soul stage, she asked hesitantly. Her master was at spirit transformation stage. In her mind there was no way that anyone could be stronger than her master. The Elder could only be at nascent soul stage then. Mahayana stage, Wen Renhe said slowly. Bailey Qingmiao's mind went blank, completely unable to comprehend the realm that Wen Renhe was talking about. Why would a cricket at Qi Foundation stage want to come and protect me who is at Mahayana stage? Wen Renhe asked. Bailey Qingmiao shook her head. I didn't have the time to think carefully about it, so I rushed over. Wen Renhe was not pleased with this answer, but Bailey Qingmiao was really a brainless being, so he could only accept it reluctantly, instructing her, "Next time before blocking a knife, even if you do not have time to think carefully, first count to 3 before you rush out again and again. You probably won't do it after thinking twice, so learn to count first." Oh. Bailey Qingmiao was so shocked by Wen Renhe's flat tone that she could not lift her head. She hung down her head to keep these words in her heart. Edited by Ninja Proofreader. Talia. Chapter 7.2. Battle of the Scattered Immortals. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the other side, Yin Hanjiang and the white woman fought hard. Wen Renhe could speak with Bailey Qingmiao without any hindrance because Yin Hanjiang was holding the white woman back. The white woman transformed into countless snowflakes and wrapped around Yin Hanjiang, who in turn scattered into countless sword shadows once again, fighting her head on. In an instant the ice field of Wanli turned into a hell of freezing cold. Bailey Qingmiao saw with her own eyes how a piece of her robe that fell on the ground directly froze and shattered to pieces. The temperature was now probably dozens of times lower than when she was buried in the snow. In the howling of wind and snow, only the place where the two of them stood was calm, just like an ethereal paradise untouched by the hell around them. A whistling voice mixed in with the sound of the wind echoed in everyone's ears, a lowly stripling at spirit combination stage with a contemptible sword from who knows where wants to defeat me. Even your Mahayana stage master can't help you. Hearing her words, the attack of the blood light got even more fierce. The sword, that had originally only been guarding Wen Renhe's side, was half buried in the snow. When the white woman wanted to mobilize the power of the ice field, a mass of ice and snow exploded in her body and countless ice and snow fireworks bloomed on the vast ice land, accompanied by the shrill scream of the white woman. Drops of blood rained on the snowy plains. When Rinha reached out to catch a drop of blood and clenched his fist. The back of his hand was covered with blue tendons, his blood surging. A blood vessel like a green snake slowly surfaced on his skin. Anger filled his chest as he roared his command, "Come back." Hearing the order, the blood-light sword flew back to Wenrenha and landed on the snow, turning into a half. Kneeling Yin Hanjiang. Wenrenha held his shoulder with one hand. Yin Hanjiang was missing one hand and one foot. After he merged with the magic sword, each sword light was made up from his own flesh and blood, and the swords that had just exploded together with the snowflakes were his own limbs. Ah! You're hurt. Bailey Qingmiao hurriedly took out a handkerchief to bandage the wound for Yin Hanjiang, but was pushed aside by Wenrenha's soul force. Absorb the snow flame. I will protect you. Wenrenha spread his hands and the flame appeared in front of Yin Hanjiang. But, Yin Hanjiang glanced at the snow trying to gather and his eyes sank. His hit didn't kill that woman. Wenrenha didn't give Yin Hanjiang another chance to speak. He inserted the snow flame into Yin Hanjiang's body through his Baihui acupoint, and the snow flame entered his body. Yin Hanjiang had to use his soul force to absorb it, otherwise he would only waste his lord's intentions. He couldn't disobey his lord's order and immediately sat cross-legged to cultivate. At this moment, the snowflakes in the sky turned into the white woman who was smaller than before. This time, the woman's voice had an extra hint of anger in it. How dare that lowly spirit combination stage hurt me? The wind blew on Wenrenha's robe, and with a flash of cold light a black halberd appeared in his hand, breaking through the snowstorm and smashing the white woman's body. The white woman's body scattered in the air and all 10,000 miles of the ice field of Wanli shook in an instant, 1,000 meters deep ice cracked, 10,000 tons of snow were lifted to the sky and then fell heavily, rolling up 10,000 feet of snow. Bailey Qingmiao moved closer to Yin Hanjiang, and felt like a tiny bird between heaven and earth, whose feathers were plucked out by the flying snow. The whole ice field of Wanli howled and wailed. She couldn't even see her surroundings. In the snow mist she could only see Yin Hanjiang, who was next to her. She stared at the snow fog for a while and then she couldn't see anything. It was snow blindness, staring at the snow for too long hurt her eyes. Bailey Qingmiao hastily closed her eyes and curled up her body, listening to the sounds from outside. She didn't know how long it had been, but she heard Wenrenha's always calm voice say, "Spirit combination immortal. Did you really think that you are superior to the others? You're nothing away from this ice field." Then there was another puff of smoke. Bailey Qingmiao used her soul force to treat her eye injury, and after a while she felt that she could see again. When she opened her eyes she was shocked by the sight. There was no longer any ice field of Wanli or ice white woman, there was only Wenrenha and a woman in a blue dress confronting each other over rolling hot lava. Bailey Qingmiao. The snow, where was the snow? The blue-dressed woman looked the same as the previous white woman, but at the same time, she had the rosy glow of a living person on her face, her hair and eyes were also black. She was covering her chest, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth, which was obviously a sign of a serious injury. Wenrenha was holding his halberd. His weapon was the same as his robe, both had dark gold patterns on a black background. But this time, Bailey Qingmiao saw clearly that the dark gold patterns on the robe and weapon were linked together, forming the 7 killing stars in the sky. The golden light emerged from the black clothes, and the 7 killing stars blossomed in different colors. It was the power of the stars that destroyed the ice field. This was also the power of a Mahayana expert. With just one stroke of their hand they could change the world upside down. The ice field, where once Bailey Qingmiao could hardly breathe, could not resist the full force of Wenrenha's blow. By that time, Yin Hanjiang, who had absorbed the snow flame, had already awakened and murmured, "My lord, Bailey Qingmiao looked at Yin Hanjiang's limbs and saw they had already recovered, except for his left arm which was still recovering slowly. She gently moved her body, hiding behind Yin Hanjiang's back, revealing only half of her head as she secretly peeked at Wenrenha. Bailey Qingmiao recalled that when she was asked why she thoughtlessly stood in front of the elder, she only gave half the answer to the question. She was in fact a bit embarrassed to say the rest, that she thought she could block the first blow. On this very day, witnessing the power to shake heaven and earth caused by the battle between those two, it became clear to Bailey Qingmiao that she was as feeble as dust and her whole body could not stand up to the power of a single breath of such masters. In the past, Bailey Qingmiao wanted to reach nascent soul stage. Her senior martial brother had told her that when she reached the nascent soul stage they could become a Tao couple, but she didn't have much attachment to Tao cultivation and only thought about love. Now that she had witnessed Wenrenha's power, she finally understood what it meant to be a cultivator and what power it represented. The ultimate aim was not reaching nascent soul stage so they could become a Tao couple, but the immortality that could break through the heavens and shatter the void. Bailey Qingmiao had an enlightenment and entered a mysterious realm. Even without the core formation stage in mind, the qi in her dantian started gradually condensing. The thunder clouds in the sky were condensing and gradually thunders started falling. From the core formation stage onwards, every realm had its own tribulations. The core formation had small thunder tribulations and the nascent soul had violent tribulations, all of which were predestined and unavoidable. Wenrenha took his time to spare a glance at Bailey Qingmiao, nodding secretly in his heart. This child could be taught. If this was how she understood the Tao, then she would be merciless and cold-blooded, there was no need to kill her. The blue-dressed woman's arms trembled slightly as she asked, "Who the hell are you? How did you break my domain and destroy my foundation? I had never even heard of someone like you before I entered seclusion." Wenrenha said, "You are not in seclusion now, are you? You should have used a secret technique to cultivate yourself to become an immortal after the end of the war. The cultivators at the end of the Mahayana stage would face heavenly tribulations and after the tribulations they could ascend to the immortal realm. But many cultivators would die during their heavenly tribulation, with their spirit destroyed. Some Mahayana practitioners, knowing that they could never escape, took the initiative to use secret methods to disperse their flesh and deceive the heavenly calamity, and used the spirit of the immortals leaked during the calamity to cultivate to immortality, so they could ascend to the immortal realm without facing the heavenly tribulations. Their power originated from stealing from heaven, so their strength was beyond that of Mahayana cultivators. There were scattered immortals in several major sects of the righteous patch, but they usually didn't show up easily. Only when the sects faced great disasters would they make their move. In the original book, Wenrenha was saved by Bailey Qingmiao after being wounded by a scattered immortal of Shangqing sect, while that Shangqing sect scattered immortal was killed by Wenrenha. Having lost their strongest combat strength they gradually declined. This venerable has gained enlightenment 300 years ago, Wenrenha said. For how many years have you been hiding from the heavens? The woman dressed in blue was speechless. He only needed 200 years to reach Mahayana stage. She had been in seclusion for 800 years. Were young cultivators so amazing these days? As for breaking your domain, when Renha's eyes swept across the ice field of Wanli, we only wanted to take the snow flame, so you attacked my subordinates indiscriminately, right? It was because you guys were bullying this little girl. I just saw it happen, the woman dressed in blue answered. Her current enlightenment of the core formation stage is related to this life-and-death experience, Wenrenha said. What does this have to do with you? I'm afraid that your cultivation has not been successful. When you leave seclusion, come to see us. We will test your skills to see how strong you are. The woman wearing blue was speechless. Wenrenha waved his halberd and said coldly, when you think you are strong, you attack unreasonably and pick those of lower realms, but when you find that you are not invincible, you start reasoning with them. Unfortunately, you made a huge mistake. It is not up to you to decide whether or not to reason out. Baihui Acupoint, in the practice of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, Bai Hui is used generally to clear the senses and calm the spirit. Edited by Ninja Proofreader. Talia. Chapter 8.1. The Master of Xiling Pavilion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Renha looked at the boiling magma under his feet, and the 7 killing stars halberd in his palm shook slightly. Pointing it to the woman dressed in blue, he obviously didn't intend to let her off the hook so easily. Wait a moment, the woman in blue said. I have no enmity or resentment against you. You also took the snow flame, so why don't we just leave it at that? She couldn't beat him, so now she wanted to run away. Let you go, sure, Wenrenha said. Left Protector, you have been following me for many years. What kind of opponents do I let go? Yin Hanjiang came behind Wenrenha with his broken arm and said respectfully, His lordship is magnanimous and seldom kills potential opponents. In fact, few people were killed by Wenrenha himself. When he attacked Shenyuan's sect, most of the people were killed by Yin Hanjiang, and Wenrenha killed only the old patriarch. The rest were killed by Xu Yanyan and other experts. Seeing that Wenrenha didn't budge, Yin Hanjiang explained to the woman dressed in blue, the Venerable seldom fights against cultivators with lower cultivation, they are not worthy of the Venerable's trouble. For cultivators with potential, the Venerable will step back and wait for the other side to improve their strength before fighting. The path of slaughter was a road paved with death. If you didn't push yourself to the limit, if you didn't kill the opponents with the equal standards, and if you couldn't win against your weakness and gain strength, you wouldn't be able to advance. Even though Wenrenha had enjoyed every step he had taken since he stepped on the one-way road and could not turn back, every step he took was a walk on thin ice. Can you still improve your strength? Is there anything valuable in you that is of enough worth for this venerable devil to spare you? Wenrenha asked. The woman dressed in blue gritted her teeth and pointed at Bailey Qingmiao. My reason is her. Ha! Wenrenha raised an eyebrow. Bailey Qingmiao was being struck by lightnings, and the 100 meters radius around her was full of silver thunders which looked huge, but it was only the core formation stage thunderstorm, so none of the 3 people took it seriously. Speaking of which, why would you give her the snow flame? Wenrenha still did not understand. In the original plot, Bailey Qingmiao spent 5 days looking for the snow flame to treat He Wenchao, but she never met any scattered immortal. The snow flame isn't something I gave her, it was being drawn to her. The blue-dressed woman knew that it was useless to lie in front of these people, so she said honestly, I have been in closed-door cultivation in the ice field of Wanli for 800 years, sleeping under this cold ice thanks to this snow flame. But even though I have been guarding it for so many years, I haven't absorbed any yang qi. When it was drawn to her, I had to come to see what was so special about this little girl. Yin Hanjiang recalled that the Devil Venerable once said that the snow flame was a chance that no one but only Bailey Qingmiao could get. As expected, whatever the Lord said was the only reasonable in this world. The scattered immortal had been guarding it for so long, but it only took 5 months for Bailey Qingmiao to take it away. I already have the immortal spirit qi and can see things that ordinary cultivators cannot. On the verge of death, a divine light from between her eyebrows attracted the snow flame to her. I guess she is related to the remains of an ancient god, so I marked her for future investigation. That's all. Wenrenha looked the woman dressed in blue up and down. If it was just marking her, why did you need to appear? Isn't that just because I sensed your presence? The blue-dressed woman said, I was afraid you also saw that this little girl is special and came for the relics of the ancient god. I was afraid that you will get the advantage first, so I was going to expose your identity as a demonic cultivator in front of Bailey Qingmiao and kill you to gain her trust, and then find an opportunity to follow her and seize the chance. It was very reasonable, this was also what a cultivator should do, so Wenrenha nodded his head in approval. It was just that this blue-dressed woman was not mentioned in the original plot. Why was that? Until the end, you didn't see her coming out or harming Bailey Qingmiao. If it hadn't been for us, would you have contacted Bailey Qingmiao? Wen Renhe asked. The blue-dressed woman was silent, seemingly unwilling to answer. With the slight rise of Wen Renhe's eyebrows, the 7 killing stars halberd glowed with a dark golden light and a great force trapped the blue-dressed woman. Wen Renhe pressed her head towards the magma. It was no ordinary magma, it was sun fire sealed under the ice field of Wanli. Even a single touch would cause great damage to the soul. When Wen Renhe fought with her before, he found out that it was not her main body, but an clone. With the help of the cold air of the ice field, it was a powerful force. If he could not find the main body, there was no point in killing the clone. So he directly used the 7 killing stars halberd, his own soul-bound magic weapon that was linked with the dark gold pattern on his robe. It could also borrow the power of the 6th star of the south. It used the body as foundation of the array and the killing aura of many years as the center, making the 7 killing stars halberd display its power as it was used to melt the snow of the ice field of Wanli and uncover the fire hidden under the ice layer. It was ridiculous that this land had been frozen for 800 years and nobody knew that less than 100 meters below was the fire of the sun. The blue-dressed woman was born extremely beautiful, her whole person emitted a cold and noble temperament. Her and Xu Yanyan's beauty was of 2 different types. She was extremely in love with her own appearance, so when Wen Renhe pressed her down like this, the wound on her face would never be cured unless she ascended to the immortal realm and reshaped her body. No, she shrieked and said resignedly, I'm the supreme elder of the Xiling Pavilion and scattered immortals have no physical restraints. The master of Xiling Pavilion and I have a pact of dedication, so I need a body I can use in the Xiling Pavilion to do things. I can see that this little girl cultivates the heart method of the Upper Qing sect, so if it wasn't for you here, I plan to go back to the Xiling Pavilion to discuss it again. The master of Xiling Pavilion. He Wenchao's wife, who married in order to revitalize the sect, knew that He Wenchao had a childhood sweetheart and was crazy about killing Bailey Qingmiao. She was a vicious woman with strong fighting ability. In the original plot, Bailey Qingmiao dragged He Wenchao to the ice field of Wanli. With the craftiness of the scattered immortal, it was easy to see that He Wenchao was Bailey Qingmiao's weakness. Therefore, He Wenchao was turned upside down for his divine power. Wen Renhe felt all of this was reasonable while reading, except for Bailey Qingmiao's attachment towards He Wenchao. Wen Renhe also didn't understand the monopolistic desire of those women who were paired with He Wenchao. He didn't understand why they fought for and even committed murder for this indecisive man. He never thought that love could make people crazy to this extent, but if it was done in order to gain power or success, he could relate. The remains of ancient gods were extremely valuable for every true cultivator. It was only a pity that this scattered immortal, with all her cultivation, didn't realize that Bailey Qingmiao was not related to the ancient gods' relics, but that she herself was one of the ancient gods and her divine character could not be taken away by others. Unless Bailey Qingmiao herself would give it to someone else. When Renhe remembered that the leader of Xiling Pavilion spent half of her life sticking to He Wenchao and laying her hands on Bailey Qingmiao, yet her strength did not increase, so there was no need to spare her worthless life. Thinking like this, Wen Renhe's face remained unchanged as he directly pressed the blue-dressed woman's head into the hot magma. The blue-dressed woman struggled frantically, using her scattered immortal's soul force to resist with all her might, but she was still suppressed by the 7 killing stars halberd, only slowing down Wen Renhe's speed slightly. However, it was in these few seconds that Bailey Qingmiao finished her heavenly tribulation, and entered the first layer of golden core. She woke up from her heavenly tribulation and opened her eyes. She blinked blankly first, then looked at her own dantian. When she saw that she had reached the golden core stage, she jumped up happily and said, I finally entered the golden core stage, so when I enter the nascent soul stage, I can finally be with my elder martial brother. Wen Renhe. He let go of the blue-dressed woman and instantly moved in front of Bailey Qingmiao. Yin Hanjiang immediately followed him, standing behind Wen Renhe and watching the blue-dressed woman warily, to prevent her from attempting a secret attack due to a grudge. With Yin Hanjiang around, Wen Renha never had to worry about being attacked from behind. What did you just say? Wen Renha said with a cold face. Be with my elder martial brother. Bailey Qingyao stamped her feet with a red face and said, Oh, elder, stop talking about it. Wen Renha grabbed Bailey Qingyao's wrist, checked her soul force and then looked at her strangely. Where is your merciless path? It was clear that she reached the golden core stage because she was enlightened in the merciless path and she had no use for Shangqing sect's cultivation method at all. However, after the heavenly tribulations, the merciless path method had disappeared and the soul force in her body was exactly the same as that of Yuan Chao, which was the cultivation method of Shangqing sect. Merciless path. Bailey Qingmiao seemed not to remember. What is the merciless path? She had also forgotten the memory of Wen Renha enlightening her. Ah, your brain was indeed struck by lightning, Wen Renha sneered. Otherwise, how could you explain that after the heavenly tribulations, Bailey Qingmiao only forgot the matter of the merciless way but was also preoccupied thinking about Yuan Chao? Take her away from the ice field of Wanli. Wen Renha picked up Bailey Qingmiao with one hand and threw her to Yin Hanjiang. Edited by Ninja Proofreader. Talia. Chapter 8.2. The Master of Xiling Pavilion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yin Hanjiang caught her, without asking why. Then following Wen Renha's example he single-handedly carried Bailey Qingmiao by clothes and flew away. In the original book, Wen Renha regarded this girl as a treasure, that needed to be kept safe in the palm of his hand and needed to be cared for, so Yin Hanjiang took care of this girl as if she was the life of the Devil Venerable himself. Now that Wen Renha treated Bailey Qingmiao as common grass, Yin Hanjiang also acted casually towards her. After the two of them left, Wen Renha walked towards the blue-dressed women and recalled the smile used by Xu Yanyan when she pulled her subordinates together as he smiled at the blue-dressed woman. The Supreme Elder of Xiling Pavilion was so frightened as she used a kneeling posture in the air and said in a trembling voice. You, what are you going to do? Why did she act like this? I just smiled gently. Wen Renha felt it was strange in his heart so he withdrew his smile and said with a straight face. I am very interested in the remains of the ancient gods you mentioned. Find a way to get it. I won't expose your true face in front of Bailey Qingmiao. The blue-dressed women looked at Wen Renha suspiciously. He was clearly not interested. If you cannot believe it, this venerable will not force you, Wen Renha said. But this venerable will still come for you in 100 years, and I hope that by then your strength will be worth fighting for this venerable. The blue-dressed woman shuddered and said, What kind of monster are you? How could the Mahayana stage have power that is comparable to a mortal? Xianyuan sect, Wen Renha. Wen Renha left his name and address then left the Wanli ice field. Bailey Qingmiao who was just crossing the border didn't hear their conversation, nor did she know of blue-dressed women's malicious intentions toward her. Bailey Qingmiao only thought she was a well-meaning senior. She also didn't know that Wen Renha was the sect leader of Xianyuan sect, so she foolishly waited for Wen Renha with Yin Hanjiang at the entrance of the Wanli ice field. Still worried about the blue-dressed women she wandered around Yin Hanjiang. Is the elder all right? Is the lady of ice fields all right? They should stop fighting. It's obvious that they are all good people, so why are they fighting? It is all my fault. Yin Hanjiang seemed to turn deaf. No matter what Bailey Qingmiao said, he didn't respond. Wen Renha sighed when he heard this. There must be something wrong with this Bailey Qingmiao's brain, right? Elder. Seeing that Wen Renha returned safely, Bailey Qingmiao's eyes brightened as she ran up to him. Seeing that he was fine, her expression was once again one of concern. The elder on the ice field, not dead. Wen Renha's words were simple and comprehensive. It was only then that Bailey Qingmiao became relieved and bowed to Wen Renha. Thank you for your help. If you hadn't sent me to the Wanli ice field to gain experience and taken away the fire feather cloak, I would not have been able to achieve enlightenment in Tao and ascend to Golden Core. Hearing these words, the cold-hearted Wen Renha really wanted say. No, I really wanted you to die, he nodded. You've been down the mountain for a long time, I still need to help him heal, go back. Bailey Qingmiao, hearing Wen Renhe's words, was happy to return. You could even see a trace of joy in her back. When Renhe palm landed on Yin Hanjiang's arm, displeased, he said. Venerable originally wanted to treat your body coldness, but instead, he injured you. It's because I am not strong enough. Yin Hanjing said as he bowed his head. Go back to main altar, this venerable will help to heal. After that, when Renhe wrapped one arm around Yin Hanjiang's waist and wrapped him in the light as they vanished. In an instant, they returned to the Shenyuan sect main altar. As for the overturned Wanli ice field, Wen Renhe did not care about it. Anyway, the environment of Wanli ice field was special and full of extremely cold qi. In another 100 years or so it will probably recover by itself. When they came to the spiritual spring at the back of the main altar, Wen Renhe asked Yin Hanjiang to soak in it. But Yin Hanjiang took 3 steps backwards. This is the cultivation place of Venerable, this subordinate cannot use it. Yin Hanjiang, don't let this Venerable repeat his order, Wen Renhe said in a deep voice as he pinched Yin Hanjiang chin. If you dare to refuse this Venerable again, I will cut off your tongue. Warm fingertips rubbed against Yin Hanjiang's skin, making his face burn red. Yin Hanjiang had the courage to take a closer look at Wen Renhe before he resignedly closed his eyes and took off his clothes to soak into the spiritual spring. Most of the clothes in the cultivation world were protection magic treasures, just like Wen Renhe robe that was specially refined by him to integrate attack and defense. Otherwise, it would be unseemly for everyone to wear mortal clothes, their own aura alone could turn their clothes to dust, not to mention defense. Since clothing was a defensive weapon that would block most of the aura from the outside world, it was necessary to at least change into ordinary clothing before practicing into the spiritual spring or use qi to heal wounds. Yin Hanjiang still had a single layer underneath, which stuck to his body when his body immersed in the water. Wen Renhe also took off his robe as he walked into spiritual spring, putting his hand on Yin Hanjiang's back heart, helping him separate from his soul-bound sword. The blood-red sword was forced to leave Yin Hanjiang's body, spinning reluctantly in the air as Wen Renhe summoned his 7 kills halberd. The halberd buzzed as the sword returned to its scabbard honestly. You need to refine your own soul-bound weapon, Wen Renhe said. This sword can forcefully enhance your strength, but it can't be refined or used at will. The magma under the Wanli ice field is a good place for refining magic weapons, but there are no suitable materials. Yin Hanjiang felt like his body was drained after the sword left his body, making him unable to speak. He closed his eyes tightly and began to absorb the qi with the help of Wen Renhe. Wen Renhe took a moment to guide him, and when he saw that Yin Hanjiang had successfully settled down, he got up and left spiritual spring. He then arranged a gathering array, and waited for Yin Hanjiang to slowly refine the snow flame. He took out a jug of spiritual wine from his sleeve and leaned against the stone beside the spirit spring, watching Yin Hanjiang cultivate while secretly pondering what to do in the future. This time when Wen Renhe went down the mountain, he had close contact with Bailey Qingmiao. He ran into the leader of Xiling Pavilion and also indirectly contacted the male lead He Wenchao through Xu Yanyan. Through this contact, he found out that things were very different from what he had imagined. He pulled out the book and read it again. Many details were shocking to him. The plot he thought was full of mistakes, now made sense to him, making him very thoughtful. For example, the leader of Xiling Pavilion, at first Wen Renhe only thought she was a poor woman who had been coaxed by He Wenchao's flowery words and blinded by love and did many irrational things because of her jealousy, using all sorts of methods to make it difficult for Bailey Qingmiao. But, after meeting the blue-dressed women, he realized that everything the Xiling Pavilion master did was reasonable. Without the ancient god's relics as bait, how could He Wenchao make a woman love him so much? Since her character was so reasonable and since there was a source for his willingness to sacrifice his life for Bailey Qingmiao. Was there any other mystery in other seemingly blindly written content? When Renhe was drinking and flipping through the book, noting down every unreasonable point waiting for future verification. He could have ignored everything, and it was written on the title page of the book that he was not interested in fixing the plot bug. But since Bailey Qingyao was one way or the other his master, the kindness needed to be paid back. Will the plot always go according to the book? Is his death and Yin Hanjiang madness also destined? There was no reason for him to back off when he was already involved in this situation. Besides, escaping was not the character of Wen Renhe. If that was his fate, then he'll change his life against the will of heaven. The spirit wine still had some influence on cultivators. Wen Renhe, who was deep in his thought, half dropped his eyes and leaned against the stone wall as he fell asleep. Deep in cultivation, Yin Hanjiang in the spirit spring moved. He had already absorbed all the power of snow flame and recovered his severed arm. His body's corpse qi had also been swept away. His cultivation directly jumped from the first layer to the 9th layer, making the void stage very close. Yin Hanjiang saw that Venerable seemed to be asleep. He climbed out of the spiritual spring and gazed at Venerable's sleeping face. He stared at him intently for a moment before he picked up the robe he had thrown on the ground and hugged it in his arms before he covered Wen Renhe's body. Afterwards, he looked at the remaining half of the wine of Wen Renhe like a wood carving. He became motionless. Wen Renhe woke up when Yin Hanjiang covered him with robe. He just didn't open his eyes, wanting to see what Yin Hanjiang would be like when he was unconscious. He was usually submissive, and recalling the madness in the later period of the book, he thought that it was impossible for a person to change so much at once, so maybe he didn't notice it before. Yin Hanjiang has been frozen for a long time, seeing that Wen Renhe didn't sober up. He reached out his hand and picked up the half of the wine that was already cold, sticked out the tip of his tongue to taste it before putting it back in its place. He didn't drink it at all, but only tasted the wine. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have noticed it. Yin Hanjiang's heart was beating like a drum and he was having trouble breathing, when he heard Devil Venerable behind him say, "Left Protector, do you want to drink?" Yin Hanjiang turned pale from misery, but he didn't dare to look back at Venerable, so he said in a trembling voice, "Venerable, this subordinate, you've always restrained yourself. Even if you drink, you won't do anything wrong, so why repress yourself to this extent?" When Wen Renhe stood up, his clothes casually moved from his upper body. He picked up the wine pot and the half-full bottle of the wine, and stuffed it into Yin Hanjiang's hand. "In your spare time, this Venerable will allow you to drink." Yin Hanjiang. Edited by Ninja Proofreader. Talia. Chapter 9.1. 7 Killing Halberds. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wen Renhe felt that it was necessary for him to have a talk with Yin Hanjiang. Yin Hanjiang is his left protector and a part of his demonic sect. So it wasn't necessary for him to be so cautious, only daring to take a sip of wine while he was asleep. When he first picked up this child he never wanted to make him a puppet. With a flick of his fingertips, the black robe on the ground was draped over Yin Hanjiang's body. Yin Hanjiang had just absorbed the snow flame and had plenty of yang qi. His wet undergarment clothes and long hair had already dried out. When clothes flew over, Yin Hanjiang stretched out his hand to put them on. At the same time, he tied up his long hair and knelt in front of Wen Renhe with his sword, respectfully and obediently. Wen Renhe slowly said, "Protector Yin, back then, when this Venerable ordered you to become a sword cultivator, did you have any complaints?" When he took the child back to his sect, he already saw his fate and aptitude. Yin Hanjiang had single spiritual root and was born under the influence of the Ursi Majores, the seventh star of the Big Dipper, also known as the Alcade and God of Change with great destructive power. Because of such aptitude, Wen Renhe thought that it was suitable to make Yin Hanjiang a sword cultivator and his own vanguard. So he gave the young man an iron sword and a cultivation technique that he had snatched from some unknown place. In this way Yin Hanjiang became Wen Renhe's sword. Rarely did Yin Hanjiang hear Wen Renhe confide his heart to him. He raised his head to look at Venerable as a little starlight flashed in his eyes. "Venerable," he wanted to say something but stopped, Wen Renha knew that Yin Hanjiang was confused, panicked, so he wouldn't tell the truth without being forced by his order, so he commanded coldly. Speak. With the order from Wen Renha, Yin Hanjiang's words became smooth and he said, when I was 5 years old, the foreigners invaded and slaughtered the whole village of this subordinate. It was only by luck that I was left with a breath of life in me. When I felt someone passing by, I thought the worst thing that could happen was just death. I don't know where my strength came from, but I grabbed the corner of the man's clothes and met the Venerable. It was rare for him to speak so much, so Wen Renha straightened and listened attentively. There is something that the Lord does not know about me. Yin Hanjiang touched the storage belt around his waist, and a rusty iron sword appeared on the ground. It was the one given to him by Wen Renha. At the age of 18, after this subordinate built his foundation, he went down the mountain to find the foreign force that had slaughtered the village that day. That year, Wen Renha remembered something in a trance. The corner of Yin Hanjing's lips curled slightly and seemed to be smiling as he stroked already old and worn-out sword and whispered. This subordinate saw Lord, clad in silver armor holding his spear, wearing the flame-red cloak of the army on his back leading a tired army division to fight against foreign enemies. At that time Wen Renha raised his broken spear and said to his deathly tired soldiers. We can escape now, but remember one thing, there are citizens behind our border. When the walls fell, our soldiers made new ones with their flesh and blood. But if we escape now, do we want our citizens to protect us with their flesh and blood? Wen Renha did not use his cultivation, he sealed his own cultivation and used the strength of his own body to kill the enemy with his soldiers. A few days after the battle he guarded the border and killed all the outsiders who had slaughtered the village that day. Yin Hanjiang was afraid that the Lord would find him, so just like a common man he hid in the frontier town, waiting for Wen Renha to lead his battalion in triumph. What was the slaughter path? Yin Hanjiang gradually understood it in his heart when he saw the victorious soldiers returning with a smile. The path of slaughter can be a sword that slaughters people or it can be a sword that protects the world. Kill to stop killing, stop fighting with force, this was the way of Wen Renha. Yin Hanjiang held his iron sword with both hands and said to Wen Renha. When this subordinate hid in the corner and saw the triumphant return of your honor, he had only one idea in his heart, he wanted to be my lord's soldier. He held the iron sword in his arms and his palm stroked on the rusty spot that seemed to be the most precious place. Yin Hanjiang seemed to tell with every action that he was willing to become a sword of Wen Renha. He didn't remember such an event that happened 100 years ago. In order to improve his cultivation, he participated in countless battles which honed his state of mind. In order to cultivate his mind, he often blocked his cultivation and went down the mountain, starting from being an ordinary soldier to being a general leading the troops in battles. When the cold ice blade sliced across the face and blood splattered on the robe, life and death were the most intuitive cruelties. The most difficult thing in the path of slaughter was being aware of the process of killing, not blaming yourself for killing or not going crazy over killing. After countless battles, the 7 killing halberds were finally refined on the battlefield. Wen Renha thought that it would be a weapon that would devour a soul of human beings. But he didn't think that the weapon refined in the most cruel places in the world would become a guarding weapon. When Wen Renha gained enlightenment in Tao, his heart and as well as his spirit were hurt and thought that after stepping on the blood and flesh of countless people to climb into the altar he would become a merciless devil. However, in the battle that Yin Hanjiang had seen with his own eyes and in battle with 7 killers halberd had finally taken shape, Wen Renha had to admit one thing. Since he was young, he had never changed. The Supreme Elder of Xiling Pavilion couldn't understand why Wen Renha with the strength of Mahayana period could surpass her strength of the scattered immortal. The scattered immortal who only know how to evade the heavenly tribulation and cultivated in seclusion for 800 years, how could she understand that the 7 killing halberds carried not only the full power of a demon cultivator, but also prayers of the people of this world during these 300 years when Wen Renha has participated in numerous battles. When the 7 killing halberds were completed, the stars of Big Dipper shone with them. The moment when Renha gained enlightenment was also the moment Yin Hanjiang entered the path of Tao. So it was like this. With the move of the single finger, Yin Hanjiang magic sword, which was full of ferocious aura, obediently fell into Wenrenha palm. This magic sword was obtained by Wenrenha from the Sea of Blood in the underworld. It gathered the evil spirit of 10,000s of fierce ghosts and was a powerful weapon that was far more powerful than any other top-notch magic weapon in the world of cultivation. The magic weapon level of the cultivation world was divided into 3 levels. Treasures, spiritual weapons, and magic weapons, and each level was divided into 3 grades. Upper, middle and lower. Above all of them were immortal weapons. Immortal weapons were not things from the mortal world, and only a few great sects had a few immortal artifacts as treasures. This magic weapon corresponded to the immortal weapon, and after Yin Hanjiang incorporated it into the magic sword, it was able to exert power far beyond his realm, but it was also extremely harmful to his soul. Back then, it was Yin Hanjiang who begged Wenrenj to give him this magic sword. In order to keep up with Wenrenha by being his left protector, he fed demons in exchange for a strength far beyond his realm. Yin Hanjiang has corpse chi in his body, which could hold this magic sword, but it also made him suffer a lot. His soul was constantly fighting the demon sword. It was only through the support of his respect for Wenrenha that he was not enchanted to be possessed by the magic sword. This sword is not worthy of this venerable's army. Wenrenha threw away the magic sword and raised the kneeling Yin Hanjiang with one hand and solemnly said, "This venerable will refine a better one for you." It was this subordinate's low strength that made him rely on this magic sword to boost his strength. Yin Hanjiang said, "There's no need to be anxious," Wenrenha said. "Even if you are just a pawn, you will naturally follow the immortal world or the demon world. Wherever this venerable goes, you have to follow. How could you stumble over by a mere magic sword? The sword obtained for Yin Hanjiang cannot be overpowered by any other magic swords in any way. If you wanted to refine a magic weapon, the time, the place and the people were indispensable. The timing was of heaven needed to be just right, and the war between the righteous and evil way was approaching. The heaven and earth aura and battle intent induced by the countless cultivators was an opportunity to refine the sword. As for the place, the ground of fire under the Wanli ice field was the most suitable sword furnace. Yin Hanjiang already understood the meaning of Wenrenha's words. He already has 7 killing halberds to protect himself, so taking on a few thousand people was also not a problem. The only trouble was the materials. When Wenrenha rummaged through his sleeve, he had saved quite a lot of heavenly materials over the years, but unfortunately not enough that matched Yin Hanjiang, so he could only do with some supplementary materials. In the midst of rummaging, Wenrenj saw abusive love affair. "You are the only one I will never change." When his hand fell on the cover of the book, he suddenly thought that there were many natural materials and earthly treasures written in this book, among them snow fire was one of them. In the original book, Wenchao absorbed snow flame and built the nascent soul, which coincided with the war between the righteous and evil patch. The cultivator above the nascent soul realm had to follow the elders of the sect to form an array. The war had been going on for more than 10 years, and Wenchao had only been promoted to nascent soul just recently, and his cultivation was not as strong as the others, so his soul-bound magic weapon was destroyed and his foundation suffered heavy damage. Edited by Ninja. Chapter 9.2 7 Killing Halberds. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After the battle, both sides suffered great damage. The headmasters and scattered immortals of several major sects were slaughtered by Wenrenha alone, who was also hurt and hidden. Then he was saved by Bailey Qingmiao. Bailey Qingmiao saved Wenrenha, and at this time Wenchao's foundation had been damaged. Unless he finds the suitable heavenly material and earth treasure to refine his new soul-bound magic weapon, he will grow old and die within 5 years. Bailey Qingmiao burst into tears when she saw her elder martial brother lying on the bed with such serious injuries. She heard that there was a fairyland world in the Gold Coast Cliff, and there may be elixir or materials in it, so she secretly went to the Gold Coast Cliff to help her martial brother find the medicine. On the way there she met Wenrenha, who seeing that Bailey Qingmiao wanted to go to such a dangerous place alone, accompanied her. They went through all kinds of dangers on the Gold Coast cliff, and finally found the treasure of the fairyland, the broken meteorite iron. Bailey Qingmiao happily took the relic back to He Wenchao and didn't mention how much danger she had encountered. She just wanted to let his elder martial brother recover. Unexpectedly, during the year of her adventures, He Wenchao encountered several near-death crises. The elders of Shangqing sect send younger martial sister Lu Xinye to the material older brother who was possessed by the demons. Then, regardless of her own strength of only the Golden Core realm, she forcibly cultivated together with He Wenchao and used her own yin to save He Wenchao's life. After that her cultivation dropped from the Golden Core realm to Foundation Building realm. He Wenchao, who was helped by Lu Xinye, although he didn't return to his original state, his life was saved at least. With the treasure that Bailey Qingmiao found, he spent 3 years in seclusion, refining the broken meteorite iron and became a soul transformation cultivator in one go. Bailey Qingmiao learned about He Wenchao and Lu Xinye in the 3 years of his seclusion, and spent every day in tears during those 3 years. However, every time she saw Lu Xinye cultivating with the group of new disciples who was now sickly and weak, she became soft-hearted again. Lu Xinye's qualifications were not inferior to Bailey Qingmiao, and she was also a proud daughter of heaven, and was treated like a star in the sect. Now that she had fallen into the foundation building stage, to bully and avoid her, many disciples of the sect said that she took advantage of the crisis and committed herself to He Wenchao. So how could Bailey Qingmiao bully such a woman? She could only gnash her teeth and bear it. After He Wenchao exited seclusion, he helped Lu Xinye find the elixir to regain her cultivation. Bailey Qingmiao, who was holding back for 3 years, had a big quarrel with He Wenchao and asked him if he had feelings for Lu Xinye. He Wenchao grabbed Bailey Qingmiao's shoulder at that time and comforted her in a warm voice. "Sister Bailey, you also saw that I was seriously injured at that time. I had no idea what happened, it was Sister Lu who took the initiative. Qingmiao, you should know that you are the only one in my heart since childhood. But younger martial sister Lu, if I don't help her heal her, I will never feel at ease in my life. In future, during my heavenly tribunals, my heart will be eaten by demons. I have to help her, younger martial sister. Can you understand me just once? Besides, Sister Lu is so miserable now, don't you sympathize with her?" Bailey Qingmiao pointed to her heart and said in tears. "Elder martial brother, you can only see that Sister Lu cultivation has been damaged for you. But what about me? When I was on the brink of death on a Golden Coast cliff and you didn't see it, elder martial brother, will you just pretend it never happened?" "Of course not." He Wenchao hugged Bailey Qingmiao. "I will live and die with my younger martial sister. The pain in your body also pains my heart." Then He Wenchao tried every means to coax Bailey Qingmiao. He also caught fireflies in the back mountain to light up the stars for her. He also used his newly cultivation to roam the sea of clouds with Bailey Qingmiao and spoke sweet words to her in the sea of clouds. After Bailey Qingmiao's anger finally subsided, she even accompanied He Wenchao to help find elixir for Lu Xinye. She thought that after finding the elixir, her elder martial brother wouldn't owe Lu Xinye anymore. But then Lu Xinye hurt her the most, and she didn't even thank Bailey Qingmiao for everything she had done for her. What was worth mentioning was that Lu Xinye was the woman who was refined into the everlasting soul lamp by Yin Hanjiang. She owed Bailey Qingmiao and finally paid it back with her own life. A cause and effect were all set. When Renhe recalled the plot and had little interest in the abusive love between Bailey Qingmiao and He Wenchao. In his case it was meteorite iron that he paid attention to. He Wenchao took meteorite iron and refined it into a fan. It was the configuration of the male lead to display how handsome he was. He Wenchao's thunder spirit root and Yin Hanjiang's golden spirit root, not sure how I translated before this roots, were both attributed to Yin. So the materials suitable for He Wenchao were also suitable for Yin Hanjiang. If it was any other item, like snow flame that was destined to belong to Bailey Qingmiao, they wouldn't be able to obtain it but only exchange with Bailey Qingmiao. However, in the original book, it was clear that meteorite iron was acquired by Wen Renhe for Bailey Qingmiao. It originally belongs to him, so this venerable should have full authority to deal with it. This venerable devil thought, why should it be given to He Wenchao? Wen Renhe had a relationship of cause and effect with Bailey Qingmiao, but he has nothing to do with He Wenchao. Regardless of his death, he will not take out his own things to save He Wenchao. Thinking like this, Wen Renhe waved to Yin Hanjiang. Come here. Yin Hanjiang hesitated for a moment before he walked over and sat beside the Lord, and heard him say. There is a fairyland on the Gold Coast cliff and there is hidden broken meteorite iron. 10 years from now, the gate of the fairyland will open. This venerable will take broken meteoric iron and you take it to refine a divine weapon. This time, Yin Hanjiang didn't refuse. His lord would not allow him to refuse. Wen Renhe was satisfied with his obedience and said. The broken meteoric iron is a heavenly opportunity of this venerable and this venerable must take it. However, I am destined to have a bloody disaster in the middle of the demon's war. Yin Hanjiang's face sank as he listened to his words, the magic sword felt his emotions and returned to Yin Hanjiang's hand with a sham sound. Wen Renhe appeased him by saying. Don't worry, it's not a death calamity. You cultivate well, and if I go missing at that time, come to this location to find me. He then pointed out for Yin Hanjiang the location where he was seriously injured and exiled in the book. This time, he wouldn't need Bailey Qingmiao to save him. Wen Renhe entrusted his safety to Yin Hanjiang's hands. An abusive love affair. You are the only one I will never change. Yin Hanjiang should have also actively searched for Wen Renhe too, but he was always disturbed by righteous disciples. By the time Yin Hanjiang found Wen Renhe it was already after he and Bailey Qingmiao found the broken meteoric iron at the Gold Coast cliff. The man in the book was seriously injured at that time and knew fully well that he might not be able to suppress those ambitious people Shenyuan sect, so he did not take the initiative to contact his subordinates even though he had the opportunity. At that time, he didn't even believe in Yin Hanjiang. At this time, he already read the book and knew that Yin Hanjiang would never betray himself. Knowing that there was a calamity approaching Wen Renhe, Yin Hanjiang became very anxious and practiced in the Shenyuan sect every day. Hoping he could break through to the Void Realm before the war. If he had more strength, he would be able to help his lord a little more. After receiving the news from Xu Yanyan, he instructed the 4 altar masters to prepare for the battle. 6 months had passed since the encounter in the town and Bailey Qingmiao was not there. He Wenchao often went to look for Xu Yanyan under the pretext of patrolling the mountains and getting rid of demons. During this time even without the help of Snow Flame he advanced to the nascent soul realm according to the plot of the original book thanks to his dual cultivation with Xu Yanyan. After advancing to the nascent soul realm, you could obtain more resources from the sect. The sect leader and several elders were quite optimistic about He Wenchao and even told him many things only elders should know. He Wenchao received such tangible benefits and of course liked Shai Yanyan even more. He even bought a mansion for her in the town, and the two of them lived like a loving couple. Which was also unlike the appearance of fight that happened in the book. In the book, Xu Yanyan died at the hands of He Wenchao. She could be regarded as a huge obstacle in the early stage of He Wenchao's cultivation. He Wenchao really suffered a lot. He Wenchao hated her so much, he killed Xu Yanyan during the first chance he got. Xu Yanyan's skill in snooping for information were superb. She asked for a lot of righteous side arrangements and pretended to be innocent. She also secretly passed the news to Wen Renhe and asked. Lord, when can I dump He Wenchao to go to my subordinates? 6 months. I only touched one man for 6 months. Can you understand the feeling of eating only one dish for 6 months? It's too painful. Wen Renhe. Respect can open possibilities, you don't need to eat other food. Xu Yanyan. 6 months to only absorb the aura of one person. Wen Renhe. When you're in closed-door cultivation, can you still be unhappy with the qi of heaven and earth being absorbed and moved to another place? Xu Yanyan. She didn't expect her cold-hearted Devil Venerable to understand her. She secretly hoped to fight quickly and kill He Wenchao before the war with the righteous patch. Meanwhile, Bailey Qingmiao finally returned to the sect and reported her realm to her mentor, becoming the youngest golden core in history and shocked the entire Shangqing sect. Edited by Ninja. Chapter 10.1. The Tao is merciless. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Before Bailey Qingmiao, it was He Wenchao who was the fastest person in the Shangqing sect to advance to the Golden Core realm. He became a Golden Core cultivator in just 3 years, after he built his foundation at the young age of 18. Cultivation was a way of stealing from heaven, and it became more and more difficult to cultivate as you advanced. It was relatively simple to attract qi and gain qi enlightenment. Ordinary martial arts practitioners could do it even if they only had good physical durability. The foundation building was the real threshold to enter the world of cultivation. This threshold eliminated countless people. How many people, who yearned for this cultivation path, were stopped in front of this high threshold and unable to advance until they died? And even if you advanced to foundation building, would you be able to reach immortality? Probably not. There were many people, who had come to a standstill in the foundation building period for more than 50 years, and had not formed a golden core until their life force was exhausted. Qi enlightenment is to absorb the energy of heaven and earth into the body, qi refinement is to refine them for their own use. Foundation building is to build the foundation and use heaven's and earth's qi to force out the acquired impurities in the body and achieve the innate body. The Golden Core realm is to form golden cores in the Dantian, and for the first time your divine sense can look inside its body. It is then, when Dantian is emerging and the body becomes a world of its own, truly transforming cultivator from mortal to immortal. It was already a miracle that He Wenchao was able to form it in 3 years. But what about Bailey Qingmiao? When she was just 18 years old, she built her foundation, and at the end of the year before her master could teach her the mental cultivation of Golden Core, she already advanced to Golden Core. Elder Qing Yu of the Deacon's Hall had checked Bailey Qingmiao's cultivation and confirmed that her qi was normal and not devil qi. She cultivated the heart method of the Shangqing sect, and she understood the heart method of the Golden Core realm with her own strength. Such a talent has never appeared in the Shangqing sect before. Elder Qing Yu nodded his head in satisfaction, a light smile played on his lips. After offering incense to his ancestor, he rang the Shangqing sect's moon bell. The Shangqing sect's moon bell was precisely one of the 3 great immortal artifacts of the Shangqing sect, guarding Shangqing sect mountain's protection array for many years. The bell's ringing could be heard throughout the sect unless the cultivator ringing it was on the brink of the death. Ordinary Golden Core cultivators were not worthy of the Deacon Hall elders summoning the whole sect. Even He Wenchao, who advanced to Golden Core 3 years ago, failed to receive this treatment. Bailey Qingmiao's situation was rare, and Elder Qing Yu decided to activate the moon swinging bell after careful consideration. As soon as the moon swinging bell rang, He Wenchao, who was tossing in the bed with Xu Yangyan at the bottom of the mountain, also heard it. With the sound of the bell, the voice of Elder Qing Yu spread to everyone's ears. Lingyun Peak, Bailey Qingmiao under the Master Qing Rong advanced to Golden Core. It took her a year. He Wenchao froze. Xu Yanyan also heard the sound of the moon bell, but she was not a disciple of the Shangqing sect, so she could not hear the voice of the Elder Qing Yu. She pretended to not know anything and encircled He Wenchao's neck with her jade arm, whining. "Young He, don't bully this concubine, hurry up, excellent acting, worthy of being the right protector of the Shenyuan sect." He Wenchao, however, was no longer in mood. He hurriedly got up, and got rid of her smell on his body with a purification trick. Xu Yanyan looked over questioning. "Young He." He Wenchao said indifferently. "I suddenly remembered that I have some important business to attend to. I need to return to the sect. I may not be able to visit you these days. Be good and wait for me." After saying that he turned around and left, Xu Yanyan propped herself on her arm and leaned lazily on the bed. Putting on clothes and imminently turning over a new leaf, yuck. Bailey Qingmiao has returned to the sect. A voice came from the window. Xu Yangyan was startled and looked intently. She didn't know when Renha and Yin Hanjiang had broken the window. So it was Venerable, you scared this subordinate almost to death. I thought that my cultivation had regressed and my vigilance had become so poor that I didn't even know that someone had broken in. Xu Yanyan didn't hurry to put on her clothes or cover herself with the blanket and looked at the both of them frankly. However, as if they were blind, Renha and Yin Hanjiang ignored Xu Yanyan's appearance and posture. Yin Hanjiang used a purification trick to clean the table and chairs in the room for Renha and used the clear wind technique to blow away the strange smell in the house and opened the window, before he invited his Devil Venerable to take a seat. Xu Yanyan. She flattened her mouth and threw clothes on her body with a casual move. She saluted the Lord and looked at Yin Hanjiang, then her face froze. Yin Protector, have you already reached soul combination? Xu Yanyan's heart rose with caution. Yin Hanjiang and her were Devil Venerable's left and right protectors, yet the Venerable highly valued left protector. Before Xu Yanyan could comfort herself that Protector Yin was only at the soul combination stage and his magic sword, although strong, it hurt the body and soul, and couldn't last too long. Otherwise, it would be demonized. In comparison, she was a little more powerful. However, in just 6 months, Yin Hanjiang has risen from the soul transformation realm to the soul combination realm. Wouldn't it be just a matter of time before he broke through the realm of void? The right protector felt a sense of crisis. Unexpectedly, Venerable shook his head in dissatisfaction and said, "It is only a soul transformation, it is not even close. That's not right." Xu Yanyan felt that she smelled something different. Her pair of alluring eyes looked back and forth between Renha and Yin Hanjiang. Yin Hanjiang has not changed, he was always silent and loyal, Lord was as powerful and cold as ever, and the way they got along hadn't changed. Xu Yanyan narrowed her eyes and found that Protector Yin was standing a little closer behind the Lord than before, and the posture of Protector Yin guarding behind Renha was also a little bit more relaxed than in the past. It was just a little bit, but it gave a totally different feeling. The alarm bells were ringing in her heart, so she hurriedly went forward and got down to business. "My lord, in the past half-year, I have committed myself to He Wenchao and helped him cultivate until nascent soul, so that He Wenchao will have the opportunity to participate in the important matters of the sect. Knowing the location and position of their nascent soul realm's disciples, the 5 major forces of Shangqing, Heavenly Sword, Jiuxing, Biluo and Wuxiang Temple, as well as the disciples of other smaller sect, they will set up large arrays in the north and south of Xianyuan sect temporarily blocking the spiritual veins, so that they will have no heaven and earth qi to support them when they engage in battle." Xu Yanyan told how much she had given and how much information she had received these days so that she could compete with Protector Yin for credit. She wanted to show Protector Yin that it wasn't enough to just follow and flatter the Venerable, as she had made some real achievements. Abusive love affair. "You are the only one I will never change" has depictions of the massive demon war from the perspective of Bailey Qingmiao, who was only a Golden Core disciple at the time and didn't know much about it. Within 10 years her specific daily routine was all about her older material brother, thinking about him, worrying about him, missing him, saving people on the way and showing her good character as a female lead. It was unknown how the righteous way was arranged, Renha also did not know, but with information, they had the outline plan of the righteous path. This subordinate believes that we need to send 2 experts to prepare in advance at the location of the arrays, take 2 ingenious positions, destroy their array, and then wipe out these nascent soul disciples in one stroke. Xu Yanyan raised her eyes, the feminine warmth in her eyes disappeared, leaving only fierce cruelty. She was dressed in white, but as beautiful as a blooming Manju shahua, flower, https://www.saipantribune.com/index.php/the.legend.of.the.other.shore.flower/ waving gently to lure the lost people to the other side. She was ruthless, cold-hearted, and would never stop at anything to achieve her goal. This was the true character of Xianyuan sect's right protector Xu Yanyan. As she spoke, the star of Dubhe, in Chinese astrology symbolizing lust, appeared in the night sky, shining brightly. Edited by Ninja, proofread by Mari. Chapter 10.2. The Tao is merciless. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The leader of Shangqing sect and the leaders of other major sects were watching the stars at night, speculating about the heaven will. The leader of Nine Star sect looked at the sky with a dignified face. The three stars of Polis, in Chinese astrology symbolizing power, Alcade, in Chinese astrology symbolizing destruction, and Dubhe flicker and reflect each other. It is an ominous omen. How could that be? The leader of Biluo sect said. A few months ago, I predicted that the Dubhe star would be suppressed by thunder light and become dull. The Alcade have the appearance of being possessed by the devil, the color of blood is hidden in it, and there is a high possibility of self-destruction after Polis would be killed. The three stars were all decadent, and it was good time for the righteous to wipe up the demonic way in one fell swoop, so how could their fortune suddenly flourish? The heavenly sword sect master gaze was like a sword. 6 months ago, Polis calamity disappeared, his star protector Alcade then broke through the magic barrier, and then the Dubhe star shone. All changes come from Polis. The leader of the Shangqing sect said. Polis is no other than the revered master of the Xianyuan sect, Wenrenhe. He was born 100 years ago, followed by Devil Sword emissary unifying the devil path in just a few decades. If Wenrenhe is not eliminated, he alone will suppress the righteous path for thousands of years with his strength. Originally, it was the Shangqing sect that should have dealt with Wenrenhe, but it seems that it will not be enough now. The leader of Biluo sect said. We have to divide more experts and immortal weapons to surround and kill Wenrenhe. The master of the Nine Stars sect said, the will of the heavens is unpredictable, our sect is engrossed in predicting heaven's opportunities and we seldom fail. How can fate change so much in half a year? Is it because the heavens don't want us to see the outcome of the war between the righteous and demonic way? The abbot of Wuxiang Temple invoked a Buddha's name and put down the beads from his hand. A Buddhist staff appeared in his palm, and his eyes, which had been closed tightly, opened, the color of compassion was gone. His eyes were full of fierce light. The abbot wants to fight. The leader of the Shangqing sect looked happy. With you on our side, we will get twice the result with half the effort. After a secret meeting of the several sect leaders, they set a time for the attack and rushed back to their respective sections. The leader of the Shangqing sect walked out of the secret room and came to the deacon hall, talking to Elder Qinyu. Bailey Qingyao advanced to Golden Core realm. Elder Qinyu said everything, and the sect leader smiled broadly. With Bailey Qingyao and He Wenchao here, the Shangqing sect will have successors. We don't need to worry about that. We can let go of the first battle. Younger martial brother Qinyu shall stay at the sect and guard the swinging moon bell to preserve strength of Shangqing sect. Qinyu knew that there was no way to avoid this battle and said to the sect leader. But these two children, Bailey Qingyao and He Wenchao, are having a disagreement. It's Bailey Qingyao losing her temper again, isn't it? The sect leader chuckled. A little child's emotions are just that, after she reaches the nascent soul realm, she won't be like this. Neither Qinyu nor the sect master took their quarrel seriously, but He Wenchao was struggling to coax Bailey Qingyao. The reason for this was that after Bailey Qingyao returned to the sect, she directly checked the patrol records of her elder martial brother in the deacon hall during her absence. For the first time, she and He Wenchao had been separated for such a long time. After being apart for so long, and having witnessed a battle between a scattered immortal and Mahayana cultivator in Wanli Ice Field, after she nearly died, she naturally missed her elder martial brother and she wanted to know what her elder brother had done during her absence from the sect. The records of the Deacon's Hall were public, anyone could read them. Bailey Qingmiao was first happy for her senior brother's promotion to the nascent soul realm. However, the more she looked, the more wrong it felt. He Wenchao went down the mountain every 2 days, the number of times was too frequent. Bailey Qingmiao used to stick to He Wenchao every day. She followed him almost every time he went down the mountain, so she knew very well how often he used to go. It was once a month. At this time Yao Wendan, senior brother Yao, came to the Deacon Hall to collect the medicinal herbs for the pill pavilion and saw Bailey Qingmiao staring at the Deacon's Hall record jade slip, so he approached his junior sister to congratulate her on her promotion to the Golden Core realm. Senior brother Yao, Bailey Qingmiao asked, "Have you seen Big Brother? I looked at the rotation schedule and it was supposed to be him patrolling the mountain today, why isn't he here? Isn't he down the mountain? He often goes down the mountain recently and he gave Miss Shu a house, so he probably has a guilty conscience." Yao Wendan was a character who couldn't mince his words, so he smoothly told all he knew and instantly regretted it, giving himself a slap. The jade token slipped from her hands and fell to the ground. "What did you say? Senior brother bought a house for Miss Shu?" Just then, He Wenchao rushed back to the sect and heard Bailey Qingmiao words. In the dark, he embraced Bailey Qingmiao and said affectionately, "Sister, you've finally come back. These days, I was so worried about you, I missed you so much." Yao Wendan, knowing that he had said the wrong thing, bowed his head and ran away, leaving He Wenchao and Bailey Qingmiao to solve their problem on their own. After interrogating He Wenchao, Bailey Qingmiao rushed straight down the mountain and went to the town to look for Xu Yanyan to question her about what relationship she had with He Wenchao, and He Wenchao followed closely behind. After she rushed down the mountain away the mountain protection array, Xu Yanyan and the others noticed Bailey Qingmiao's movement after she rushed down the mountain away from the protection array, and the right protector immediately asked, "My lord, what this subordinate should do?" Wen Renhe warned, "Don't reveal your identity before the massive demon war, the rest is up to you." "That's great." Xu Yanyan clapped her hands and said, "I've had enough, I want to get out of here, I miss my well-behaved subordinates, woo woo woo." When she spoke she really shed tears, only heaven knew that it was her first time staying with one man since she entered the way of Tao. She already absorbed enough of the thundering root and this mysterious power, and Xu Yanyan's strength has also been promoted to the 9th layer of the realm of void. She had long since grown tired of He Wenchao. If it wasn't for snooping around she wouldn't aggravate herself so much. When Renhe and Yin Hanjiang looked at each other and left the room, using an array in the next room to secretly watch the development. When Renhe also wanted to see what Bailey Qingmiao would do, when she found out what He Wenchao had done. The other room of Xu Yanyan's house was a servant's room. Xu Yanyan didn't hire a servant, so it had been left empty all this time with only a small bed inside. After Wen Renge sat down, Yin Hanjiang couldn't stand behind Venerable anymore, so he stayed beside him, but Wen Renhe pulled him down saying, "Sit." Yin Hanjiang was flattered sitting beside the Venerable on the small bed. His Adam's apple quivered slightly, his eyes were drooping. He did not dare to look at their shoulders, which were only half an inch apart. They waited for a while, but He Wenchao and Bailey Qingmiao hadn't come yet, probably still arguing on the road. When Renhe felt the corner of Yin Hanjiang's lips move, as if he was trying to say something, so he said, "Say what you have to say." Hearing his lord's words, Yin Hanjiang didn't dare to conceal it and hesitantly asked, "Venerable, the way of stopping killing is killing and guarding the world. Why do you want to provoke a war between the righteous and the demonic way and displease? Take a chance, the heaven." He wasn't a good man and he didn't feel uncomfortable when he heard how Xu Yanyan planned to slaughter the group of righteous disciples. He also had no opinion with whatever his lord wanted him to do. But there is still a bit of doubt deep inside his heart, wondering why his lord was like this, because he already knew about the war between the righteous and demonic way. Couldn't it be avoided in advance? This was not the way of his lord. Normally Yin Hanjiang wouldn't ask questions, but now that the Lord has asked and his identity also has changed a little bit, all Cade should not question the polis. Yin Hanjiang decided to report truthfully, and let the Lord solve his doubts. Hearing his question, Wen Renge didn't answer, but instead asked rhetorically, Protector Yin, who do you think a cultivator is? Yin Hanjiang thought a little. Man of superior attainments. He had never thought about such issues, but he knew that ordinary people would call the high and mighty cultivators immortal elders, and that the cultivators would also be called immortals. They also thought highly of themselves, and separated the mundane world from the world of cultivation, which was clearly in the same human realm. Wrong, there was no emotion in the eyes of Wen Renhe. Whether it's you or me, and the same goes for millions of cultivators of the righteous and demonic paths. They are just a group of thieves who are stealing the vitality of heaven and earth. Yin Hanjiang had never thought that Wen Renhe would actually evaluate the cultivators like this. Look at the location of the Shangqing sect, that Wen Renhe said, pointing to the distant mountain path, such an abundance of spiritual energy, there won't be any natural disasters for millions of years. How many creatures can this spiritual mountain nurture? If the human race were to build a city near here, they could raise millions of ordinary people in 1,000 years, but there are less than 100 disciples of the Shangqing sect above the Golden Core. The Great Tao is merciless and doesn't care about the lives and deaths of ordinary people. Yin Hanjiang pursed his lips, remembering the village that had been slaughtered, and for the first time, he expressed his view on Heaven Tao. Indeed, but the Tao of Heaven would not be willing to have cultivators seize the opportunity of heaven. If there was no internal consumption between the practitioners, we will concentrate on cultivating in isolation and not interfere with each other. After tens of thousands of years, the qi between heaven and earth will be gone, and there will be nothing left, no more grass in this human realm, no more living beings. Wen Renhe said. The war between the righteous and the demonic path is neither the righteous way to get rid of the demonic way, nor is it the demonic way to slaughter the righteous way and cause chaos in the world. Rather, they had discovered through their calculations that another heavenly calamity was coming, and that if they did not fight for internal friction, too many cultivators would sooner or later attract the heavenly Tao, turning it into a bloodbath. At that time, there will be no cultivators or human beings. Stealing the heavens, cheating the heavens, and seizing the heavens is the nature of the cultivators. They chase a balance under the heavenly Tao and survive between the cracks. In this battle, whether we live or die, we will be returning the qi to the world. If I die, the place where my body is buried will give birth to countless living creatures in 100 years. Wen Renhe said he looked indifferent, not caring about his life and death. Yin Hanjiang felt a pain in his heart and grasped his magic sword, saying, This subordinate will not let his lord die. This venerable knows. The Yin Hanjiang of the book proved his loyalty to Wen Renhe with his life. Wen Renhe patted the back of his hand and said in a rare warm voice, If this venerable goes, you can come accompany me. Don't live like in the book, and live only for demons' orders. When Yin Hanjiang heard these words of Wen Renhe, he actually unexpectedly showed an expression of relief and solemnly said, Thank you very much, my lord. Edited by Ninja, proofread by Mari. Chapter 11.1 Escaping by Feigned Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While reading the book, Wen Renhe felt that Bailey Qingmiao's divine sense distribution was inadequate and had some obvious tendency. Usually when she got along with Yuan Chao, her fellow disciples and some female supporting characters, she acted like a fool and believed everything they said. On the other hand, once Yuan Chao was somewhat ambiguous with other women, Bailey Qingmiao became extremely sharp and was able to spot that something was wrong on the first occasion. As long as she was around Yuan Chao, she could always see the love of those supporting characters for Yuan Chao. If Bailey Qingmiao hadn't been distracted by Wen Renhe and gone down the mountain for 6 months to gain experience, Yuan Chao would never have been able to hang out with Xu Yanyan all day long, and after the first or second time Bailey Qingmiao would have found it out. He noticed something was wrong as soon as she came back, but Yuan Chao tried to stop her on the way, but it didn't stop Bailey Qingmiao. He watched his younger material sister step on moon frost silk and breezily break through the window, while Xu Yanyan was removing her makeup and earrings in the mirror. She felt the window suddenly open and turned back to see a jealous Bailey Qingmiao as well as the men, who kept winking at Xu Yanyan, He Wenchao. Xu Yanyan pretended not to see He Wenchao gaze, and at the moment she saw Bailey Qingmiao, she stayed still. Her tears slid down, her knees went weak and she kneeled down. Miss Xu was always considerate. He Wenchao wanted to hint Miss Xu not to speak nonsense before his sister. But Miss Xu didn't look at him at all. After seeing his younger martial sister she wimped out. Miss Xu, even if I was kind to you, you don't need to do this. He Wenchao said in a hurry. Don't you dare say anything. Bailey Qingmiao looked at He Wenchao. She walked to Xu Yanyan and asked in a cold voice. Why did you kneel down to me? Xu Yanyan didn't speak but cried in an even more muffled voice. She couldn't even breathe and fainted with the weeping sound. Bailey Qingmiao picked up the little white flower like Xu Yanyan with one arm, and pinched her hand to wake her up. Then she put her on a chair with a cold face. Miss Xu, you're an ordinary person, no matter how angry I get, I won't hurt an ordinary person, so don't cry. As soon as she said don't cry, Xu Yanyan tears slid down again. She sobbed, Miss Bailey, you are my savior. I am so ashamed, sobbed Wu. When He Wenchao heard Xu Yanyan say this, his face was livid as he squeezed his fists. If it wasn't for Bailey Qingmiao being here, he didn't know what he would do. Xu Yanyan glanced at his stiff face and sneered in her heart. Having been together for 6 months, Xu Yanyan, who could read countless men, naturally saw through He Wenchao's nature at a glance. It was true that He Wenchao liked Bailey Qingmiao, and his sister was definitely his favorite person. The friendship between childhood sweethearts was not something that ordinary people could get into. But He Wenchao distinguished, separated, his emotions from his body very clearly. He felt if he only loved Bailey Qingmiao alone, emotionally unadulterated, he would not wrong Bailey Qingmiao. As for Xu Yanyan, she was just an assistant in his cultivation in the moment of confusion. When his sister wasn't here, He Wenchao was trying to coax Xu Yanyan to stay with him. But when Bailey Qingmiao came back, Xu Yantan was a stain that He Wenchao was dying to cover up and would never be merciful. It was a pleasure to sneak and steal, but what you couldn't hide was just trouble. Why are you ashamed to face me? Bailey Qingmiao looked back at He Wenchao, and then went back to looking at Xu Yanyan. Xu Yanyan wanted to speak but stopped again and again. Miss Xu, I will tell you the truth. I can cast secret techniques of truth words. This technique is useless against someone with higher cultivation or stronger consciousness than me, but against an ordinary person, if I wanted I could hear everything I wanted to know. Bailey Qingmiao said. Hearing this, He Wenchao continued to blink wildly at Xu Yanyan, squeezing a qi talisman in his hand, trying to imply that Xu Yanyan had stronger consciousness than his younger martial sister. He could counter the technique of truth words so that Xu Yanyan could feel at ease and boldly make up nonsense, and he would take care of other things. In He Wenchao's heart, Miss Xu had always been a good and obedient girl, and she knew that she was not worthy of He Wenchao and would not interfere with his relationship with his younger martial sister. At this time, Miss Xu would certainly not dare to tell the truth. Unfortunately, once again, Xu Yanyan did not look at him. A pair of watery eyes looked at Bailey Qingmiao and softly said. Miss Bailey, I'm a little thirsty, may I have a sip of tea to slow down a bit? Drink up, I have time to wait. Bailey Qingmiao backed away. Xu Yanyan gracefully got up, took out a small tea bag from the box and put it into the teapot, brewed the tea and slowly drank it up. She looked at Bailey Qingmiao with a melancholy expression and whispered, ever since we parted in the tea house half a year ago, this little girl couldn't forget Miss Bailey's heroic posture. When I landed on the ground that day, Miss Bailey carried me in her arms, seek justice for me, I was so happy. Seeing her like this, Bailey Qingmiao's face softened and she pulled another chair to sit opposite Xu Yanyan. He Wenchao was even more relieved. He felt that Miss Xu wouldn't talk nonsense. At that time, I thought how good it would be if I could live as Miss Bailey. Xu Yanyan looked at Bailey Qingmiao sadly, and reached out her pale and cold hand to Bailey Qingmiao's hand. Bailey Qingmiao did not refuse it. She gradually felt that she had misunderstood. The love and admiration of the other sisters for their senior brother was written on their faces, and it was clear to Bailey Qingmiao. But Miss Xu was different. There was no love for her older brother in her eyes. Instead, she looked at her with admiration in her eyes. She's such a self-reliant and self-loving woman that she would never do something like that. Who knew that Xu Yanyan's words would change as she shook her head? But I'm not Miss Bailey, after all. I'm so despicable, selfish and weak. In such a world, I simply can't live without a source of support. Younger martial sister, it is precisely because I saw this that I bought a house for Miss Xu and occasionally visited her to make her life easier. This is the one you saved. I, as a senior brother, must not let my junior sister's kindness go to waste. He Wenchao picked up the conversation. Bailey Qingmiao's brain was in disarray. She actually believed it just like this. Her face showed a guilty expression as she said to He Wenchao. Senior brother, I misunderstood you, I was wrong. In the other room, when Renhe who was observing the situation frowned, he really wanted to slap Bailey Qingmiao on the head to save his sanity. Protector Yin, would you believe such words? Is love really so demeaning? When Renhe really couldn't figure it out, so he couldn't help asking the only person besides him. Whatever Venerable says, this subordinate will believe. Whatever the other people say, this subordinate will only take it at face value. Yin Hanjiang replied. When Renhe shook his head, he really shouldn't have asked Yin Hanjiang. There was no value at all, or it was not worth it at all. On the other hand, Xu Yanyan saw Bailey Qingmiao embracing He Wenchao, untying the knot and asking for forgiveness. He Wenchao also hugged Bailey Qingmiao but also did not forget to give Xu Yanyan an appreciative look. Xu Yanyan revealed a wonderful but strange smile, and blood flowed from the corners of her lips. Miss Xu. Bailey Qingmiao hugged her elder brother and realized that something was wrong. She turned around to see Xu Yanyan start bleeding from the 7 orifices, and was shocked. She looked at the teapot and poured it out to see what was inside. The tea bag inside was actually a deadly poison. Bailey Qingmiao hugged Xu Yanyan and put one hand against her heart, trying to help her force out the poison with her qi. Xu Yanyan shook her head with great difficulty, raised her hand and gently touched Bailey Qingmiao's face, smiling at her. How much I wanted to live as you, but unfortunately. My life is thinner than paper, after all, not you. I feel ashamed of you. Can't live if, in the next life. She didn't say what would happen in the next life, as she closed her eyes and died. Miss Xu, why did you take such a desperate path? I didn't mean to hurt you, even if you really with senior material brother. I would only withdraw silently. Why Bailey Qingmiao felt Xu Yanyan icy fingertips slide down her face and her heart became cold. He Wenchao did not expect Miss Xu to choose such a method in order to hide their secret. He didn't say anything about her relationship with He Wenchao from beginning to end, only expressing her admiration for Bailey Qingmiao, not to mention even daring to look at He Wenchao. He Wenchao also squatted down and said heavily, it must have been someone who hurt Miss Xu while I was away. Younger martial sister, we must avenge her. Wen Renhe. Wait, how did He Wenchao come to this conclusion? Bailey Qingmiao took the tea bag poured out from the teapot and said to He Wenchao. Look at this sign, it's sent by Shangqing sect to fellow disciplines. And this. Bailey Qingmiao took off the purse at Xu Yanyan waist and opened it. Inside was a strand of long hair. Senior brother, is this your hair? Younger martial sister, don't be suspicious. He Wenchao quickly hugged her and said. I bought this tea bag, it was the one I didn't finish when I built my foundation. It is good for the body. Miss Xu had fallen down the stairs before, and I was worried that she had hurt her vitality, so I gave her these tea leaves to help her recuperate. As for why the tea leaves are poisonous and whose hair is in her purse, I have no idea. Edited by Ninja, proofread by Mari.